all this mumble jumble means on 10.5 is that now, first we started with the quadratic formula that we have right here. Okay? Then we took that form and we learned how to use the different information with that. And this last one then, they already had it, when you worked on 10.4, they had it factored for you. And you learned how to factor, change it back into an equation. You also learned how to set each one of those polynomials. You set each one of those equal to 0. This time, we're going to factor a trinomial. So instead of just having the two of them, we're going to split it. We're going to have 3 terms. This one here. Okay? The first time you learned how to factor, we looked at the end, the L, and then we looked at the first. Now you're going to have a trinomial, and it gets a little trickier. Okay? So when we learn this one, you can pause this when you're watching it and look at all this, but putting into action usually helps. And then going back to it, you might need to do that. So what we're going to do first is we're going to factor, and I'll rewrite that so that you can see it here. X squared plus 3x plus 2. Now, the way we're going to factor that is, it says for this trinomial, and we're going back to the equation, the b and the c, it says, so back here, the b and the c, okay? So I'll put that on the next page so you can see that up there. But I'm going to show you a slightly easier one, because I think when they give you more letters or variables, you get more confused. So I'm going to show you what that means without just thinking of it in the bx and the ax and the c. Okay? So we know that the b term is 3, and we know that the c term, which we called also our constant term, is 2. All right? You need to find 2 numbers whose sum, that's how we get to our oi of FOIL, is 3, and whose product is 2. Here is your plan of attack. Okay, so you've already done FOIL. You get FOIL. Now you have to create what you would have FOILed before. Okay, so this is going to be a product. Your L is a product of the 2 last terms in your polynomials that make this up. Okay, so first of all, you know that you want the last terms, when multiplied together, to equal 2. Actually, I'm going to just undo those and move them down just a touch. So, because when they're multiplied, the product is 2, I have to think of the factors of 2. And I'll start you out really easy. You'll like it at first when you get to it. The only way to get to 2 by multiplying is 1 times 2, right? All right, so those are the factors. Now again, this is your first taste of this, so it's pretty darn easy. Can I use 1 and 2 to get to the sum of 3? Yes, 1 plus 2 equals 3. So when I'm going to do this, my first term is x squared. My first term has to be the product of x times x. So I factored this up. That's my first term. My last term has to be the product of, that's going to make 2. So that would be, and it doesn't matter which order you put these in. Since I factor them that way, I'm going to put them like this. Now the last thing I look at is, everything in here is positive. So my operational symbols will also be positive. To see if this is it. This is your answer. You have now factored that. Okay? When they are both positive. This is the easiest way it can be. So now what you need to do to check your work is FOIL this and see if you come back up with the original equation that you were supposed to factor. So here's my first, x squared. Here's my last, 2. I'm good on those. The oi is the one that always will give you a little bit of more thinking. So you're going to look at those. 2x combined with 1x indeed gives me 3x. So you have now factored that. You started out and then you made the factoring. They were making the factoring before. All right, so the next one that we're going to work on is our original statement is going to have our oi term, our outside and inside term, is going to be a negative. So again, this straight from the book. It's identifying your A, your B, your C term. Okay? I do it a little bit different. Take out those extra variables. Okay? So my first step is always going to be, Katie and Alex, you want to be with me? And that will be on the recording. Okay? First step is going to be what, Katie? With those big doe eyes. What are you going to do? Factor out what? The 6. Your constant term, your C, whatever you want to call it. What are the factors of 6? What are the other factors of 6? Okay, just because I made the wide one first. 2 and 3, 1 and 6. Got it? Now, and that's why I wanted her to say all of them, which one of those, my next question, because I already know the factoring of my first. There's no challenge in that. I got to get x squared with the first terms. No challenge there yet. All right? Now, I have to look at these. How can I manipulate these to get to 5, a sum of 5? 2 and 3 give me a sum of 5, right? But this is a negative 5. Can I combine 2 and 3 to give me a negative 5? I can't do that. I can combine 6 and 1 to give me a negative 5. I need to do that by having the bigger number be the negative number. So if I went plus 1 and minus 6, Katie already told me this is going to give me, whoops, is this a positive? Sorry, then I need it to be a negative there. Sorry, I could have just did it this way. Nope, I can't do that. I have to do negatives. I was thinking positive. All right, sorry about that. If Katie already told me, so I have to go back on what I just said, because I had this was going to, I was thinking this was a negative as well. Okay, so what I need to do is, I need to get a product of a positive. The only way to get a product of a positive, I jumped one step ahead there. The only way to get a product of a positive is by multiplying it by the same integer, same kind of integer. 2 negatives make a positive, 2 positives make a positive, correct? So that's the first thing I'm going to think about. However, when I am doing this, I cannot use any of these if they were both positive to combine. 1 plus 6 doesn't give me 5. 2 plus 3 gives me 5, but doesn't give me a negative 5. Okay? So you're with me on this so far? After that little mix-up there? So I have to get to combining, giving me a sum of negative 5. So we'll go back to this, and I need to have 2 negatives giving me a positive. And then can I combine 2 of these to make the sum of 5? If I had a negative 2 and a negative 3, I now get my sum of a negative 5, but my 2 negatives give me a product of a positive 6. You always start with that last one because we only have integer rules for the products. We don't have integer rules necessarily for sums because we have a rule for addition, adding them. If they're the same sign, they keep that sign. But subtraction is if there are different signs, you find the difference and give it a sign. So we change it to adding the opposite as well. So this doesn't give us, this middle term doesn't give us a hint about the signs. The last term gives us the hint or the rule we have to follow because we have integer rules for products. Now, just because there was a little mess up there, I want to go to the next one before we start to practice these. So, going to this one, let me rewrite it again for you. X squared, so I know that both of my polynomials are going to start with an x. We have a negative 2x, that's going to be the sum, and we have a negative 8. So this one is our first one where our product was a negative. And I was jumping ahead of myself there. All right. So, Alex, your turn. What's my first step?
Find the, like you gotta split apart the 8.
Split apart the 8.
I don't know.
What's that math term? Anybody help him factor out the 8? How do I factor out the 8? Doing my wide ones first.
What would define what multiplies?
Right, what are they?
2 and 4.
Or 1 and 8 first,
And then 1 and 8 and 2.
and then 2 and 4. All right, everybody okay with that? You start there. I know in FOIL that's called last, but that's where you start when you're factoring. All right, so we have our factors. These are our integers that are going to work for the last terms. We know our first terms of our polynomials are going to be x's to get our first term here. We know the multiplying, the factors, has to get us to a -8. And they have to get us to a -8. So how can we get a -8? How can we get to a negative product? What are the rules of integers when you multiply to get a negative? Christopher? It has to be a positive and a negative. They have to be opposite signs to get to a negative. If you have the same signs, you get to positive. 2 negatives equal a positive, 2 positives equal a positive. So in multiplication, the only way to get to a negative product, a negative last product, we have to have a positive and a negative. Everybody okay with that so far? Now, the only step left is our OI, which is our thinking one. This is going to be sum, so by combining them. How can I combine two of these integer pairs? And they have to stay in pairs. It has to be 1 and 8 or 2 and 4. You can't all of a sudden say I'm going to use 1 and 4 or 2 and 8, because then you'll lose your last term. So how can I combine them in a way that I would get a -2? Alex, you want to do the rest of it?
A 2 and a -4.
A 2 and a -4. You want to have the 2 with the positive because you want to make sure that you have the bigger number to give you a result of combining and ending up with a negative. Okay? And then in your head real quick to check, you can go ahead and say, and it's usually the OI term that's going to cause you the problems, because the other are pretty easy to do after you factor. So you look at your OI, outside would have been -4x, inside a positive 2x, that'll get you to your -2x. So you kind of reverse it again and go back into it. Now in the book, they will show you that you can also check it by using a graphing calculator. Okay, we don't work with everything with that graphing calculator right next to us, so I don't know that that's the best way to check it. I think redoing it into FOIL to see if you come back up with the original question is a better way of checking things.